Everyone, welcome to the Running with Heart podcast, episode 21. We're at the end of our 5-week journey to the start line of New York 2013. Today, as I record the podcast, they're lining up or getting ready to line up in New York City for the return of the marathon for 2021. They missed it in 2020 and they're back this year, and it's the 50th anniversary, the 50th running of the famous New York Marathon. And as you would know if you've been following the podcast or if you've known me in any way, I was very fortunate enough to run the New York Marathon for the Heart Foundation back in 2013. It was an experience of a lifetime, one that I'll cherish forever and one I'll never forget. And it's just a stepping stone on the journey, but that, I guess, provided the platform to my running to go to a new level or to new distances, which led to Big Red Run in 2016, and then of course now on the journey of Mission 231, where I'm training to run the Lara Pinta Trail in May 2022 for the Heart Foundation. 231 kilometers, my biggest undertaking yet. I'll have 60 hours to complete it, and in serious training at the moment. We're coming up to the 6-month mark to the race day, and makes me a little bit nervous, but more on that later. So what we've been doing over the past month or so, counting down to New York's 50th anniversary of the marathon, is I've been sharing my running journal, my preparation of training and fundraising from back in 2013. And I've been looking at how it compares to my training and fundraising that I'm doing now for Mission 231 and the Lara Pinta Trail. But what it climaxes to today is I'm going to share my race recap, something I've never done before. These words have been written for the past 8 years, and I'd look at them probably every anniversary of the marathon, go through them. But besides that, they've never been heard, never been read or shared. So it's my privilege to share it with you today. Hope you find it enjoyable. It looks at what happens on the eve of the marathon, how I'm feeling. It talks about my faith and how strong I need to be with my faith, and helping me get to or through the doubts that I had going into the race and through the race itself. I'm especially remembering that in 2013, it was the year of the Boston bombings in April. So that was 6-7 months before New York. And so there was a big spotlight in New York City on security, and the world's eyes, you could feel it on New York, because it was the major marathon following Boston out on American soil, and so everyone was watching after the sad day back in April in Boston the same year. So we're going to pick up my journal on Marathon Eve. We had an apartment. My family was with me in New York City. We had an apartment in Midtown, a couple of blocks from Times Square. And so let's get into it. Now recap, New York Marathon 2013. All my race gear is set out and ready. Tomorrow is the big day. It's almost here. The coverage of the race was all over the news, with focus on security after the Boston Marathon bombings earlier in the year. All the talk on it makes me nervous. I try not to dwell on it, but it's hard. I pray to God that His protective hand is over everyone. All along, God has been with me on this journey. I've heard His voice over the last 12 months, and even before that, telling me that I would go to New York. On more than one occasion, He has told me not to worry. I'll take care of that. And that's in regards to the worry at the time. True to His word, He has brought me to the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. He has provided me with the opportunity to run the race of a lifetime tomorrow, a race I've longed to do. Over the past 12 months, I've educated and reached out to people on heart disease and health. In my fundraising, I've tried to keep that fitness and health focus, not just asking for money or selling my morals and beliefs short in order to just make a quick dollar for the cause. But as I prepare for the big day, I find myself asking, why am I really here? Why me? Why have I been chosen? Sure, over the last 12 months, I've hopefully made a difference to at least one person's life, changed it in some way. Hopefully the $13,000 I've raised will continue to affect people's lives into the future, to make a difference to those people affected or who could be affected by heart disease. And that's the thing. I think it's called the butterfly effect. The things we do, we may never know or get to see the actual effect it has on people. We just need to do the things we do, praying and knowing somehow we are making a difference to somebody somewhere. We have to learn to be content with living our lives, not knowing we've had a positive impact on and how. I still come back to the New York Marathon tomorrow. Why am I here? What's my purpose? In this great wide world, I'm just like an ant, small. Why me? Why have I been chosen to run the New York Marathon tomorrow? As I prepare for bed, God tells me, as He has many times before, to stop worrying. Have faith in Him. He's taking care of everything. I fall asleep. Sunday, November the 3rd, 2013, Marathon Sunday, the apartment. I first started running back in the red gum forest that sat next to the tiny timber town of Mathara. My school teacher and cross-country coach was Greg Dankert, and he introduced me to running and assisted me in falling in love with the sport. That was nearly 30 years ago. It's now nearly approaching 40 years ago. As the years passed, I continued to run. There were times when I would stop running for a period, but it would always be there to go back to. I set goals, sometimes achieving them and sometimes not. I took over 10 years just to get to the City to Surf starting line. I remember only maybe 9 years ago setting out for a run in Portland, only to turn back home after 20 minutes because I found it boring. Now a short run for me is 50 to 60 minutes. I run for 3 hours with no music, just me. How I've changed. On the first Sunday in July last year, I ran my first marathon. And here I am now, 16 months later, sitting on the lounge of our apartment in New York City, tying my running shoes, preparing to run the New York City Marathon in a few hours. My alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. I have to be at the Lucerne Hotel by 5:45 a.m. to catch a marathon bus, organised by Travelling Fit at 6 a.m. I haven't decided whether to catch the subway or a cab at this dark hour of the morning. Safety is my main concern. I continue to dress, putting on my Heart Foundation singlet, which I will wear with pride. I look at my race bib. I can't believe it. It's actually for the New York Marathon. Pinch me, I must be dreaming. I'm in the lounge room of our metro apartment, 2 blocks from Times Square, in Midtown Manhattan, in perhaps the most famous city in the world, New York City. And I'm fully dressed, about to step out the door and head to the start line of the world's most famous marathon. Please pinch me. Before I go, though, I have my personal worship time with God. All things through God are possible, and it is because of His plans and blessings I'm standing here, preparing for the New York Marathon. And to the purpose I'm still to discover. For the first time since April, when they occurred, I'm thinking a lot about the Boston Marathon bombings. Till now, I haven't let it get inside my head, but perhaps it's because race day is here, and at the moment it's dark. Things always seem worse in the dark, don't they? Or perhaps it was the extensive news story on marathon security last night. Perhaps because it's simply New York, and unfortunately this beautiful city has too familiar history with terrorists. Whatever the reason, the Boston bombings are in my head. Lots this morning. And some one-on-one time with God helps me to ease the anxiety slightly. I'm made to think of Jesus praying in the garden the night before He was crucified. Let your will be done, Father, He cries out. And so that is how I close my prayer this morning. Whatever today brings, may God's will be done. I go into the bedroom and kiss my sleeping children and my most beautiful wife goodbye and pray it won't be for the last time. Looking back at that, I can remember the feeling, as I said, things always seem worse in the dark, but there was such a focus on the Boston bombings, and you just really didn't know, and you just didn't know what to expect. September 11 was 12 years old at this point in 2013, so of course that's still fresh in everyone's mind. Terrorism was, a new common word in our lives, much as COVID-19 is these days. It was not a surreal moment. It was a real, somber moment, kissing my family goodbye, not knowing whether it would be for the last time. You just didn't know what was going to happen in New York that day. The lobby. So I arrived down in the lobby of the Metro apartment shortly after 5:15 a.m. I've given myself a full 45 minutes to get to the Lucerne Hotel in uptown Manhattan. At this hour of the morning, I would assume it's a 10 to 15 minute cab ride, even less by the subway. Still unsure what would be the safest form of travel. at this early hour of the day, I decided to trust a local, the guy behind the 24-hour reception desk. He doesn't hesitate in his response. "I'll call you a cab, sir. You don't want to be on the subway on your own at this hour." He makes a quick phone call and informs me the car will be 10 to 15 minutes. The time is 5:20. I feel relaxed. I should be at Lucerne by 5:45 a.m, 15 minutes before bus departure time. There is a fellow marathoner waiting in the lobby for his cab ride. He's catching the Staten Island ferry to the start. I think he was from Sweden. It's his first marathon. We chat about running and training for the marathon. 5:30 arrives. So does the guy's cab, and he departs, along with another marathoner heading for the ferry. Now it's just me and the guy behind the desk. 5:35. Still no cab. I question how long the trip will take to the Lucerne Hotel. 10 minutes, I'm told. 5:40. The phone rings. A quick conversation, and I'm told that my ride is still 10 to 15 minutes away. I look at my watch. I'm in trouble. I have to catch the bus, I explain. I can't be late. I ask to use the phone. I call the Lucerne and ask to speak to Tina from Travelling Fit. She comes on the line and I explain the situation. She tells me that they can't get the bus to wait as it's an official marathon bus and has a schedule to stick to in order to get across the bridge before they close it at 7 a.m. for the marathon. The I can't pronounce it. I'll put in the show notes the name of the bridge. She says she'll try to stall it a bit for me. I remember this stage I was getting really, really nervous. Just to get there as quick as possible, and if I miss it, then we'll sort out a way to get me to the start line via public transport. But I know, deep down, there is no other way. There are no trains, and the Staten Island ferry is the only other option, and you have to have a special mark on your bib indicating you have chosen the ferry as your official transport option. Without that mark and with all the heightened security, there is no way I'm being allowed on the ferry. In my heart, I know the reality. It's the bus or nothing. I continue praying as my head swirls with different thoughts. All the fundraising, all the hours of training to get this close and miss the marathon. I think of all the people I would let down by not running today. How would I explain it? I missed the bus. Even though I allowed 45 minutes to go 10 minutes, I somehow still missed it. I continued praying. Spiritual warfare was around me. Satan's last-ditch effort to stop me running. I hung onto the verse I was led to. May your will be done. 5:50 a.m. Still no cab. Now the guy was panicking. With all my praying, I was pretty calm. Whatever happens, it's happening for a reason. May your will be done. I couldn't understand why this was happening, but I hung on to that verse. May your will be done. We can never see the big picture God has for us, but we have to trust him and follow the path that he lies down in front of us. If I miss the marathon, it's part of the plan. I'll have to continue to follow, not understanding immediately why I was to miss it. May your will be done. 5:53. I'm going to have to hail you a cab, says the front desk guy. We step out onto the sidewalk. Yellow cabs go past, but not one is free. The guy points towards the highway 300 metres down a darkened street. You can see youths loitering in the shadows. You'll have to go down to the highway down there and hail a cab from there. I shake my head. There is no way I'm walking down that street on my own. I would have been safer on the subway. He leads me back inside. You're going to miss your bus. May your will be done. 5:58. I ask to use the phone again. As he picks up the receiver, a car pulls up outside. That's your ride. Tell him to put the foot on it. With a word of thanks, I run out the door and jump in the back seat. The driver apologises for the lateness, blaming the traffic and marathon road closures. I tell him my bus is leaving now. He puts his foot to the floor. We speed uptown via the highway, and when we pull off it, I recognise the street from yesterday. The Lucerne Hotel is a block away. I peer ahead and can see a bus. 6:08. Please be mine, don't go now. He pulls to a stop and I throw him the fare and a generous tip despite the lateness. If it's not my bus, I may come back and ask for it back. I dart across the road. A lady is standing outside the bus. Andrew. Tina, thank you so much. Quick, grab a breakfast box that they were about to go. I dart into the Lucerne and grab a box, then quickly return to the bus, thanking Tina for her help as I climb up and the door shuts behind me. I drop down to the first available seat, 2 from the front. Made it. Thank you, God. The bus ride. Before we go to the bus ride, I remember coming up that street to the Lucerne Hotel and thinking, this is it, I've missed the bus, and seeing it there, praying it was my bus. And yeah, it was just a mix of emotions getting on that bus and that door shutting behind me. As the bus moved through the early morning traffic, I tried to get my bearings. I recognised some landmarks of Lower Manhattan, namely the New World Tower and neighbouring World Trade Center Memorial. Only 3 days ago, we visited this site. My thoughts took me to how strong this city is. I reflected on those September 11 attacks over 12 years ago and the beautiful memorial that now stands in remembrance of the Twin Towers. New York and its residents are so resilient. They battled on after the attacks. Then last year, after finally getting back on their feet, the city was hit by Superstorm Sandy, leaving a trail of destruction behind. 12 months on, and they're still cleaning up and rebuilding. The city deserves a successful marathon day today. They missed out last year due to Superstorm Sandy, and they say the marathon brings the whole city together. On our right, as we continue past World Trade Center Memorial Site, is the Hudson River, and across in the distance, out of my sight, is the Statue of Liberty. On our first morning here, we climbed to the crown. Pinch me again. I look out through the windscreen and try to make sense of the road signs and how far to Staten Island. Then I realise the road is heading down. We're entering one of the tunnels that go under the Hudson River and connect to the other islands. I've looked through my breakfast bag supplied by Travelling Fit. I work out what I will and won't have for breakfast when I arrive at the starting area in Staten Island. I've brought with me a box of Special K and a banana. There are a few things in the breakfast bag that will go nicely, give me a decent pre-run breakfast. It's not the time to be trying anything new, as you don't want your race interrupted or ruined by an upset stomach. It's 7 a.m. and we're crossing the bridge, the one that starts with V, everyone, and it'll be in the show notes. This is the first bridge we'll be running across following the starter's gun in a few hours. Suddenly we are stopped, and I look ahead to see a traffic jam. There is a bus in front that has broken down, and its passengers, all marathoners, are all standing on the side of the freeway. Our bus driver goes to their rescue, offering them room on our bus. He then does a very tight reverse forward manoeuvre to squeeze our bus out into the lane, and we are on our way again. 10 minutes later, we're being dropped off on the side of the freeway on Staten Island. I've arrived at the starting line. Staten Island. Following the drop off, we had to walk maybe around 500 metres to the entry gates to the starting area. Security was huge. The only bags allowed through the gates were small clear ones supplied at the expo, and with only personal items in. Anything bulky, such as big jackets, blankets, tarps, sleeping bags, were discarded. No backpacks, full stop. You had to have any electronic devices out, ready for searching and screening. We were then x-rayed, body searched, heat searched, and then randomly again selected for another search. Your bib had to be in full view as well. If you got through all of that, you were allowed entry through the gates. Upon entry, I found my staging area, green. It was bitterly cold, overcast, and windy. I found a spot that had a view of the main stage and the bridge and prepared my breakfast. I could see where they were also filming the pre-race breakfast and wondered if Monique and the kids were watching it. They're filming the pre-race breakfast. That is pre-race broadcast, everyone. So I could see where they were filming the pre-race broadcast and wondered if Monique and the kids were watching it back in the apartment. Following my breakfast of Special K, banana, a croissant and some nuts, I turned my attention to the race, as my starting corral would be opening in less than an hour. I decided with the cold I would have to begin the race with my beanie and gloves on, as well as my long blue shirt. This I would have to wear under my singlet, as my race bib would have to be on show always. This would mean that when I started to warm up during the race, I would have to stop and remove both and then put the singlet back on, discarding my blue top. With my mind on the race, I thought towards my race plan. How was I best to tackle the marathon? I'd been debating this for days, weeks, and I guess months. And still I wasn't 100% sure what my exact race plan was. I've said all along that to run a PB in New York would be something special. To do that would require running a time better than Orange Marathon from February of 3 hours 35 and so many seconds. I believe this was definitely possible, even with my disrupted lead-in over the past 6 weeks. On the day I ran my PB, the Mudgee half, I felt a sub 3:15 was possible in New York. But that was then and this is now. I hadn't had the perfect training since a half in Mudgee. So yes, to run a marathon PB in New York would be special and would require 5 minutes per kilometres or thereabouts. Definitely achievable. The main reason I was here though was the Heart Foundation. So PB dreams aside, my main focus should be to get to the finish line and in a way that did the Heart Foundation and all of my supporters and donators over the past 13-month period proud. I didn't want to walk or crawl across the finish line at the end. Not that there's anything wrong with that at the end of a marathon. When you put your body through 42 kilometres, it doesn't matter how you cross the finish line. But when I accepted the New York mission 13 months ago, I did so with an expectation of myself that not only would I raise $7,500 for the Heart Foundation, but I would also give my best effort at the New York Marathon. It's one of the world's best, and so I didn't want to take the opportunity for granted and just complete it. I wanted to do my very best at completing it. So these thoughts I toyed with as I stood on Staten Island in the shadows of the bridge and less than 90 minutes to the start of the race I had long dreamed of completing. It didn't seem like too long before my wave, I was in the first wave, was being called into the starting corral. I moved in and began my warm-up, small jogs on the spot and stretching. We still had 40 minutes to the starting gun. I chatted to a couple of other runners, one who had run Boston earlier in the year. I checked my small but valuable piece of paper that I had stored in my hydration belt. On it were the list of 26 names of the people that each of today's miles that I was running had been dedicated to. It was part of my fundraising where the miles were sold for dedication. The 26 names listed included those who had battled heart disease or were currently battling it. It also included people who had lost their lives to cancer. Some miles were dedicated as a gift or an act of love. All names were there because they were loved, and the heart is the centre of love. It's also the organ that we must have to be alive, and hopefully it's where most people have God residing. Bottom line is, the heart is the key to life. That is why it's so important to look after it, not just for our own health, but because it is God's home in our body, which is his temple, and it is from the heart that we love others. I went through each of the names trying to recite the order, just in case I was to lose the valuable piece of paper on the course. Usually I have the names written on my arms, but I opted against that for today's race, due to the cold conditions and having a long sleeve top on. I had my photo taken in the starting corral using Winston's iPod. He'd lent it to me, so if there was a security issue, I could be in contact with Monique, hopefully via email. He lent it to me with my promise that I knew it was valuable, and if I lost it, I would replace it. In New York, we didn't have mobile phones. We went without our mobile phones. I think in the end we just decided it was too hard with the whole SIM card and numbers and that. So we went without, and not that we'd been separated until this point, besides the opening ceremony, I guess. But yeah, our contact was through email, and that was the plan, that if things were to go wrong on marathon day, emails would be sent and we could check our emails and correspond that way. So thank you to Winston for lending me his precious iPod. And it became more precious and more valuable as the race went on, as we're going to find out. It was nearing 9:40 a.m. start time when the call came across to have us ushered onto the on-ramp of the Great Bridge, the official start line. Remember, the bridge name is in the show notes. I practice it every year, how to pronounce it. And then here I've just written V and a dash, so I couldn't even pronounce it back then. This was it. The moment had arrived. I stood there at the start line in amongst a sea of runners and had a quiet moment praying to God. I remembered that moment from the 2008 Sitters Surf, the 11-kilometre mark, where he reawoke my running desire. Just when I was ready to give it away, he helped me find my passion for running and the gift he bestowed upon me. And here I was 5 years later, ready to use that gift. But how? Why am I here? Is it just the journey I've taken people on over the past year? Is there more to it than that? A school from Staten Island began to sing the American national anthem. It was spine-tingling. How am I meant to run the race today? What's my purpose? God brought me back to that 11-kilometre mark in sitter surf yet again, and how I felt running after it. Have fun, I heard. Share the fun. Okay, I thought, I'm just going to enjoy this today. What happens, happens. Then, as the cannon fired to signal the start of the 2013 New York Marathon, ING, New York Marathon, they played Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York. Very emotional moment when I realised this was all happening. Even more spine-tingling than the anthem was when I stepped towards the start line, leaving the speakers behind me, and all the runners surrounding me were singing in full voice. Wow, I'll never forget that moment. And yeah, it's hard to put into words that moment. You've got Frank Sinatra singing on the speakers, New York, New York, one of his famous songs, and we're moving forward and the speakers are going behind us, and then you can hear the sea of runners around you all singing in perfect voice, New York, New York, as you step onto the famous bridge. The famous bridge that I can't remember the name of. Starts with N, I can't pronounce. Anyway. Where are we? We've just had the runners singing. And then it was on. I stepped across the starting mat and began to run. My first steps in the New York Marathon pinched me. I began the race with Winston's iPod in my hand, having realised I had a tool to take photos to capture the starting line atmosphere. As we began the ascent over... Oh, there we go. I've got written Verrazzano Bridge. Again, it'll be in the show notes. I realised I was going to carry his iPod the whole 42 kilometres as I could take photos all along the way. I started snapping away at the Manhattan skyline in the distance. So you look out to the left. The bridge, the Verrazzano Bridge, is 2 levels, and I was on the bottom level. You had runners on the top, you had runners on the bottom, and I was on the bottom level. You looked out to the left, you could see the Statue of Liberty, and you could see Lower Manhattan. It was a surreal moment. The first kilometre was very slow due to the congestion, but I found myself not worrying. I'd learnt patience over the years, and besides, I was running to have fun today. As we came off the bridge and into Brooklyn, towards the beginning of a sea of spectators, everything clicked. Why I'm here running, what my role was. I was running towards the left side of the road. Over on the right, there were a few kids standing, holding their hands out, waiting for a high five. People were just running past them. I record my sitters surf runs when I see kids' face light up after I crossed over the road to deliver a high five, especially one year when a lone kid had stood there being ignored by a sea of runners. I chose my path carefully and made my way across the course through the mass of runners, arriving by the fence with my hand outstretched to deliver two perfect high fives and receive smiles in return. Then before me, the people standing on the fences held out their hands, wanting high fives. I delivered. Forget line running today, I was running the edges. Along the fences I ran with my right arm extended, high-fiving anyone who stood along the border, cheering us runners on. And weren't there some people? Either side of the split road they were packed, cheering and screaming, ringing cowbells, banging other items. The noise was electrifying. It was unbelievable, the whole atmosphere. I glanced at my watch, expecting to see perhaps 10 to 15 minutes, and it had been an hour and 10 minutes. I'd already run 14 kilometres. I was a third of the way there, and I felt like I'd just begun. In losing myself in the whole atmosphere of the opening stages of the marathon, I'd missed my first energy gel, due at 45 minutes. With a constant outstretching of hands seeking a high five, I didn't want to miss anyone. So I was forced to stop and crouch down near the barricades to consume my energy gel. It was then back into the run amongst a wave of spectators, high-fiving as I went. I remember that, crouching down to have my energy gel. And I remember a guy leaning over the fence going to me, "Mate, are you okay? Is everything okay?" And I'm like, I'm just having a gel away from all the crowds because I don't want to miss a moment. It was quite funny. I'm not sure at what stage it was, but I was still in Brooklyn. I was forced to switch to the left side of the road as my right arm was getting sore from the constant high-fiving. So much of my memories of Brooklyn flow into each other. I remember the noise and the enthusiasm of the crowd right throughout Brooklyn. I can recall constantly thinking, Brooklyn goes off. I can't imagine the crowd getting much louder than this. I heard Born to Run playing twice throughout Brooklyn. Early on in Brooklyn, I'll never forget running through the neighbourhood streets where all the houses were identical, white-clad, small green front lawns with Halloween decorations still on them. I'll never forget running mile 11 in South Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This mile passes through the Jewish community, and they were all dressed in black and stood silently on the sidewalks watching as we runners passed by. As I neared miles 16 to 17, my excitement grew, remembering the marathon is 26 miles, 42.2 kilometres and 26.1 miles in the mile scenario. As I neared mile 16 to 27, my excitement grew within, as it was nearing my first opportunity to see Monique and the kids, as well as my brother Dave, who had flown in from LA last night in order to see me run today. We crossed the bridge that led us into Manhattan, and it was quite different. After the noise of Brooklyn and Queens, the bridge was quiet, as it was spectator-free. And that was a security issue there. All the bridges were blocked off. No pedestrians were allowed on them, simply for the security. They actually had, I don't know if I mentioned this later on, they actually had police divers under all the bridges constantly looking for bombs. And this was all because of the Boston bombings. So yeah, we're on the bridge, spectator free. But you can make out a distant sound, like a faint rumble coming from the streets below. The bridge provided an opportunity to assess how the body was travelling with over the race completed. With over half the race completed, that should say. The bridge also provided great views of mid-Manhattan. Whilst coming off the bridge, I spotted a guy wearing a Bathurst runner's singlet. I made my way across to him and asked whether he was from Bathurst. He picked me straight away as being the guy from Portland. A work colleague had told him to look out for Andrew from Portland. I'm not sure who that would be, but seriously, what are the chances of a guy from Bathurst and Portland bumping into each other whilst running amongst 52,000 people in the New York Marathon? I was filled with excitement at the prospect of getting to see Monique, the kids and Dave within the first 2 blocks of First Avenue. But as we turned the corner to enter the 5-kilometre stretch, I was not prepared for what awaited. The noise of the crowd was like a runaway train. The energy the crowd gave off was incredible. It was so loud. I can only imagine it must be what it sounds like to run out in front of a full capacity sports stadium, or what it sounds like to be in a photo finish at the Olympic final with the whole Olympic stadium cheering. Quite a few times through the marathon, the cheering would climax so loud I would find myself looking around runners to peer ahead, expecting some race to be on between runners. However, I would then realise it was just the cheering of the passionate crowd. Back to First Avenue. As I ran through the tunnel of noise, I kept to the left side and looked ahead through the crowd. I was searching for red shirts and Heart Foundation hats that I knew Monique and the kids would be wearing. I didn't want to miss them all. The red group, with Australian flags in tow, stood out clearly. I stopped to be greeted with kisses and hugs. We were all so excited. I quickly handed over my beanie, opting to keep my long blue shirt on. And I was away, lost in the wave of runners. As I ran down the long straight stretch of First Avenue, I could not get over the crowd and the accompanying noise. I thought Brooklyn went off. Manhattan and its people had taken it to another level. Having passed mile 17, I started to think of the road ahead. I was into my final 9 miles, which equated to roughly 13 to 14 kilometres. This is usually the point of the marathon when the body starts to gradually feel it. However, with the energy of the crowd and spurred on by seeing my precious family, I felt full of energy and really only felt like I was only a third of the way through. I certainly didn't feel like I was entering the final third. How long would this feeling last? To the end or not, or to the next turn? Things can change so quickly in the marathon. From First Avenue, we crossed over yet another bridge and entered the Bronx and the Harlem district briefly. The crowds here were nowhere near as big and loud as Manhattan and Brooklyn, but they were still big and still loud. I hope that makes sense. The bottom line is Brooklyn and Manhattan was huge. The Bronx and Harlem district were big. It was, as we prepared for another bridge crossing back into Manhattan, my body began to feel the effects of the marathon. My legs were starting to feel heavy and my pace had dropped slightly. As we turned onto Fifth Avenue and a long endless climb towards the final kilometres, I couldn't believe I was nearing the end of the New York Marathon. And I didn't want it to end. I wasn't ready for it to end. I was enjoying the whole experience way too much, and I hadn't soaked it all up yet. It had gone way too quickly. As we climbed Fifth Avenue with apartments on our left and Central Park on the right, I ensured I was on the left side of the road. I was nearing the point where Team Fox, headed by Hollywood actor Michael J. Fox, stands on the sideline and cheers the runners on. It would be a dream come true to see, or even better, meet Michael J. Fox while running the New York Marathon. If I was to spot him amongst the Team Fox supporters, it would be enough to make me stop running and lose a few minutes to say hi and introduce myself. But I was also aware of reality. The chances of spotting Michael J. Fox or even Team Fox were slim in the huge crowds that were lining either side of Fifth Avenue. Similar to First Avenue, the Fifth Avenue crowds were packed in and were so loud and enthusiastic. The energy being given off helped the legs deal with the long, gradual incline we were running up that had the legs, especially the thighs, screaming in pain. The continuous giving and receiving of high fives didn't help matters, as it continuously pushed the pace with no chance to slow right down. The crowd ensured you kept moving forward at a pace quicker than if I had been running there on my own. The Team Fox banners stood out clearly, and I could hear the cowbells they were known to ring. I slowed ever so slightly as I dished out high fives and scanned the Team Fox support crew. No sign of Michael of Back to the Future fame, so I kept running, looking ahead to the entrance to Central Park. On entry to Central Park, there were a few things I immediately noted. Firstly, the hill was over at last, and although it wasn't steep, the long gradual climb was difficult at this point in the marathon. Secondly, the crowds hadn't died any. They had perhaps even grown. The noise and enthusiasm was just as loud as on Fifth Avenue, and the high-fiving continued. Thirdly, you could sense the end was near, approximately 3 kilometres, I think. The fact that you had a security helicopter hovering above you probably heightened that sense. It was so low, it was blowing the leaves of the beautiful Central Park trees. You could really sense the finish line through the crowds cheering, though. It's hard to explain, but just the heightened level of support and words of encouragement sort of had the noise climaxing as if the final curtain was about to fall. I really didn't want the marathon to end. I was enjoying the whole experience so much. And I remember running into Central Park and those things I noted there, but particularly the helicopter. At first you're thinking, oh no, what's happened? Something's happened. Because that's where the mind was. The Boston bombings happened at the finish line. And the finish line for New York is in Central Park, on the other side of the park. Central Park's huge. But yeah, the helicopter, and it was just following the runners. I don't know if there was one or two, but yeah, and it was literally like the noise of it. And as I said, we were there going into the fall in November, and the leaves were falling off the tree because of the helicopter blades, like the, whatever you call it, that pressure from them, whatever it's called. But it was just so loud. But again, and I think I say it here later on in my journal, despite the bombings in Boston and despite all the security that was happening, the New York officials, the race officials, the committee, New York Roadrunners, the police, the fire guys, all their professionals, the emergency crews, the I can't think what they call it, their army. They had every intersection blocked, and you just felt so safe while you were running this open course. And I think I mentioned a bit later on. We'll continue. We're in Central Park. We're getting near the finish, everyone. As we ran down through Central Park, preparing to exit briefly onto Central Park South, I again feel excited about the prospect of seeing Monique, the kids, and Dave again. They were going to be somewhere in the huge crowd near the Plaza Hotel. As I exited the park and into a sweeping large right-hand bend, I noticed everyone was running the short inside line of the bend. The whole left side of the road was open and the crowd beckoning on that side. So I stuck to the left and took the long way through the bend to deliver high fives to the crowd. As I continued in that fashion along Central Park South, I scanned the crowd, but to no avail. I couldn't see or hear my family. I'd find out afterwards that they had been there on the bend and had seen and called to me. I was too busy high-fiving. With Columbus Circle approaching, we again prepared for entry for the final time into Central Park. I remember just going back to my family on the bend. They had video footage. They had the video camera going. And you can actually see me go around high-fiving, and you can hear them screaming, Andrew, Andrew, and I'm in my own world high-fiving everyone. With Columbus Circle approaching, we again prepared to enter for the final time into Central Park. As I ran through the gates, I was filled with mixed emotions. Part of me was sad that this whole experience was about to end. I would never get to experience it again. Part of me felt proud. I had done it. I was about to cross the finish line of the New York Marathon on behalf of the Heart Foundation and all those who had supported my mission. I also felt compassion and sorrow as I thought of Boston and the runners and the bombings that had occurred near the finish line. And finally, I had a sense of disbelief that this was actually happening. I'd actually run 41.5 kilometres of the New York Marathon. I only had 700 metres to go of this world-famous race, and I could say I'd done it. I'd run it. Pinch me. I had disbelief that I was actually running through Central Park again. As I passed under the 26-mile banner, I knew that this part of the road well. I almost felt local. I had marched from here in the opening ceremony on Friday night. I was privileged enough to be chosen to be a representative for Australia, part of the Australian contingent, to march in the opening ceremony they hold in Central Park at the finish line on the Friday night of marathon weekend. So very fortunate to do that. So that's where we marched from, that 26-mile banner. We also, as a family, had run under here yesterday as part of the Dash to the Finish race. As a family, we got to do that. It was a 5K race they hold the day before the marathon. And so we actually got to run 5Ks from the United Nations building down the Avenue of Presidents into Central Park and to the New York finish line. All special memories. We had walked on this road when we visited Central Park and its zoo yesterday afternoon. I knew the final stretch well. It was time to enjoy it. So with pride, happiness, and a touch of sadness, but certainly no regret, I ran the home straight. Through the middle of the bleachers, the grandstand, the cheering crowds, and the helicopter overhead, I ran towards the finish line. With Winston's iPod on my hand recording it all, I ran across the finish line of the New York Marathon. Success, mission accomplished. A prayer of thanks to God who made it possible. A glance at my Garmin and new PB in New York. 3 hours, 34 minutes and 9 seconds. Roughly 90 seconds quicker than Orange earlier in the year. I was ecstatic, and as they hung the finisher's medal over my neck. Jubilation as I posed for a photo with my medal. I felt on top of the world. As we were ushered through the finisher's recovery area, I reflected on the whole experience. I never want to forget it. Staten Island, standing in the shadow and in awe of the bridge. The crowds of Brooklyn and Queens, running along the deafening roar of First Avenue, Manhattan. The ongoing support and urging in the Bronx and the Harlem districts. The climaxing noise of the crowd on Fifth Avenue, the beauty of Central Park, the roar of the crowd along Central Park South as I delivered my final high fives, and then that final run to the famous finish line. Disbelief. Had I actually done it? Was it a dream? Pinch me. I've just run the New York Marathon. The New York Marathon. I seriously can't believe it. I have a finisher's medal around my neck. I'll cherish it and what it represents. The journey, the race, the Heart Foundation, my supporters, those who have been or affected by heart disease. Faith. As I walk along the street bordering the west side of Central Park towards the finisher's exit, I have a New York Roadrunners marathon poncho placed on me. Though it's not your typical poncho, it's heavy-duty orange plastic. It's lined with polar fleece. I wear it with pride as I walk the streets of Manhattan. Hundreds, if not thousands, of fellow runners are wearing the same poncho. It's a sea of orange. I'm stopped by complete strangers asking me about the marathon and my time. Some guys from Boston who are still reveling in the Red Sox winning the World Series were just as excited I come to their country just to run the marathon. As I walk the streets of uptown Manhattan towards FIFO Schwartz, I can't even remember. F.A. Schwartz, FIFO. Let me start that again. As I walk the streets of uptown Manhattan towards FAO Schwartz, the chosen place of reunion with Monique, the kids and Dave, I again reflect on the whole marathon experience, and not just the marathon, but the whole New York experience. We were so blessed to be given this opportunity to all actually be here together. I was safe. All the runners were safe, so far. Surely nothing, that is terrorism, could happen now. The marathon didn't deserve it. New York didn't deserve it. The New York Roadrunners had done everything possible to ensure the safety of its runners and spectators. It would be a terrible shame if something was to occur. There is nothing more that could have been done. Every intersection I ran through was lined either side, shoulder to shoulder, with police or fireys, armies or uniforms. Every intersection. There were helicopters at the start and finish. There was a helicopter following the course for the final 3 to 4 kilometres. There were police divers under every bridge. The ferries were police escorted, with police and machine guns positioned on the front. There were police and sniffer dogs in the crowds. There was all the surveying, the x-raying, surveillance and searching at the start line. The recovery zone was in lockdown. There is nothing else they could possibly do. They had secured a 42.2 kilometre open marathon course. I cannot give the New York road runners enough credit for the event they have put on today. It was incredible. I enter the FAO Swartz and start searching for the book area. This is the prearranged meeting spot. My journey is almost complete. It takes me a while, but I finally get pointed to the right direction. We arranged to meet here from 2 p.m, checking in every 15 minutes. It's going on 2:30. It's just arrived, and then I spot Monique. Tabitha is with her. Dalton, Winston and Dave are not far away. We are all safe. We're all back together. Thank you, God. Now my journey is complete. Epilogue. Following the marathon, we spent another day in New York before flying out on Monday evening with more than a touch of sadness and a feeling that we were leaving a part of us behind in the Big Apple. We were bound for Anaheim, where we spent the next 9 days enjoying the happiest place on earth, Disneyland, and the sights of Hollywood. From there, we went an hour south for 2 nights at the Legoland Hotel and a day at the accompanying Legoland. Then our time in the land of hopes and dreams was over, and we returned to Australia with more than a suitcase of souvenirs. Inside, we had packed many memories that we would cherish forever. It had been the trip of a lifetime, and we're so blessed and fortunate to be given the opportunity. My first run following the New York Marathon was the first Tuesday back in Australia, over 3 weeks after my big day in New York. It was a simple, easy-paced 5 kilometres, and I titled it Reflective Run. The run through the quiet streets of Portland provided great opportunity to look back on the journey of the last 13 months, climaxing with a run through the 5 boroughs of New York. It's hard to pinpoint where the journey started. You could say it was when Sarah from the Heart Foundation rang me to get feedback from the Gold Charity Run in City Surf. You could then argue that it actually began when I was given the opportunity to be a Gold Charity Runner in the 2012 City Surf. I would probably argue that the whole journey began in the small school oval in the tiny town of Mathara, situated on the mighty Murray. For that was when I was first introduced to running and fell in love with the sport. And I go on a bit about how I'm going to retire from running and from marathons. And as we know, that has happened numerous times. My family will vouch for that, that I've retired after every single marathon I've run since. At the time, I thought New York was the perfect opportunity to retire because it was the icing on the cake, so to speak, the top of the staircase, the top of the ladder. I couldn't see where I could take my running from there. But of course, time is an advantage when you spend time reflecting on what has been and where you were going. And for me, with my faith, I spend time in God's presence, praying and listening and trying to listen. And my running journey has evolved since New York, as we all know. And that's what finds me right here. I'm doing a podcast of all things for Mission 231 as I prepare for the Lara Pinta Trail. And reading that, you can probably tell I had a lot of emotion in the voice and some of the memories coming back. Incredible experience. And I know that I'm going to experience the same thing out there in the Australian outback. It's what you're running for that tugs the heartstrings. It really is. It's the sacrifices I make and my family make. And it's the endless love and support I'm given from the communities and extended family and friends to make these dreams and missions, I guess, become reality and success. And it's the difference you're making. Like I said at the start, it's the difference you're making, but you don't know you're making because you don't always get to see the difference. So it's the butterfly effect. You do it knowing, hoping that you're making a difference to someone, if it's just one single person. But yeah, New York is definitely up there in the highlight reel and definitely the platform that has enabled me to be where I am today with my running and I guess the confidence too with my fundraising and belief in myself. And that belief I have in myself then is what I'm looking for now in myself as I continue to deal with my anxiety battle that began in 2019 that I've shared on the podcast. I read things that happened then in the New York Marathon, that the buses incident. If that was me now, I don't know how I would have handled that, in all honesty. Even just with the Boston bombings, I don't know how I would have handled that. And that's the change in my mind and my thought process, I guess, and it's what I'm working hard on to improve. You have good days, you have bad days, you have things that trigger things, and that's happened over the last week. This past week, I've had two mates deal with cardiac issues. Here I am training for Mission 231, trying to raise awareness of heart disease and raise money for the Heart Foundation so we can win the battle against Australia's #1 killer. And two of my mates in the 1 week have had a cardiac issue. And it hits home. It's the #1 killer disease. And they're both okay. They're both doing okay at the moment. But it's out there, everyone. And it's serious. And together we've got to make a difference. So, look, I'm not begging, but I ask you to get on board Mission 231. Please donate. Please spread the word. If you can't donate or don't want to donate, please just spread the word about Mission 231 and spread the word about heart disease. Let's talk about it. Let's make it a normal conversation instead of an uncomfortable conversation. And that's what I want to achieve with this podcast as well. We spent the first 21 weeks going through my running journals and my journey to here. I guess to give a better picture of myself to everyone, why I do what I do and how I do what I do and how hard it can be for me at times as well. But I think now that it's time we change that focus to let's talk about heart disease, let's talk about health, let's talk about what we can do to improve our health and to reduce the risk of heart disease and make a difference to the statistics. So let's move forward. Let's do this together. I'm just an average Joe Blow who's using the platform I'm fortunate enough to have as a personal trainer, as a business owner, and a passionate runner who's been given a gift from God to be able to run incredible distances. Distances I never believed before that I was capable of running. And I need everyone to join me in not the run. That's my job. I'll do the run. I just need you to join me in the voice. Let's talk about heart disease. Let's talk about what we need to do to increase the fitness and health of not only Australians, but of the world. But let's start with our local community. Let's start with our family and friends. Let's make that conversation of heart disease and health normal, as I said, and not uncomfortable. Everyone, I'm going to leave it there for this week. Another long episode. I hope you've enjoyed the recap of New York Marathon. Please check the show notes in ways you can get involved in Mission 231, whether it be through donations or just general support. And as I said, sharing what Mission 231 is about. And please continue to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. The links are below and on the Running with Heart YouTube channel. And so you can see how the training is progressing and how I'm getting closer to Mission 231 and running the entire Lara Pinta Trail, because I'm doing every single step running with heart. Till next time, everyone, run with heart.